Hello and welcome back to Lawyer Launcher Behind the Bar. I'm Susan Van Dyke. Today I'm pulling one of our earlier conversations back into the feed. One I think is worth a second listen, especially if you're new around here. My guest was Colin Cameron, a CPA who spent over 35 years advising law firms on how they actually make money. He was the chief operating officer of a firm that became one of the most profitable in British Columbia, and he now runs his own consulting practice, Profits for Partners. We got into the real mechanics of a law firm's business, billing rates, recorded time, and how those numbers actually turn into profit, and why understanding this stuff early can change how you think about your own career. It's not something they teach you in law school, but it's something every new lawyer eventually should understand. So here it is again, Colin Cameron on the business side of law. Enjoy. Here we have Colin Cameron from Profits for Partners. He's a management consultant. He has deep experience in law firm management. I'm talking like 35 years. I think that's about right. He might be horrified me sharing that with everybody, but he has deep experience. He's very clever, heck of a nice guy. He's a CPA, CA, so he's a chartered accountant. He really understands how compensation and profitability matters in a firm. And why that's relevant to students today is because they're going to come in, you're going to come in really understanding the financial models and how a law firm runs as a business, because without profit, you're not running very long as a business. I think we all understand that. So students are going to really understand coming in why it matters, but we're also going to set them up for future understanding of how the financial compensation models work, so that they have future success. So it's kind of a two-pronged effort here.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, so I can't wait for you to hear from him. I think I know what he's going to talk about, so I'm excited. Okay, let's get Colin going. Welcome to the Lawyer Launcher Podcast. Hello, friends. I'm your host, Susan Van Dyke. If you're a law student or a new lawyer eager to launch a successful career, you're in the right place. Drawing on more than 25 years of experience, I'll demystify the business of law and help you understand just what it takes to succeed. With my co-host, Johanna Mills.
Hello there.
We'll empower you, help build confidence, and reduce anxiety. Our experts will share tips and advice, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. Now, let's dive in. Colin, it's great to have you here. The value that you're going to bring to students today is going to be great. And I know you and I have worked a lot together, and I know the value that you bring. And I wanted to just start with getting students to really understand initially getting into a law firm, what are the basic law firm financials/economics they need to understand. And then I'd love for them to have some future view of what it looks like in the future, because you and I both know that even a lot of partners don't stop and learn this content. So for our students to have it now and in the future is going to really set them up for success. So my first question to you is what are the basic essentials that you think students need to know coming into a firm so they have context of law firm financials?
Yeah, so I find it really helpful to start with David Maister's 5 profitability levers for law firms that he talks about in his book, Managing the Professional Service Firm. And so what those levers are rates, leverage, utilization, margin, and realization. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of each of those levers. So it gives a bit of context for you coming into a firm and understanding how these different levers work. Because as you mentioned, many partners aren't aware of how some of these things work. You're probably going to know more than the partners once.
Well, exactly. And why they matter.
Understand these concepts.
Sorry, Colin, I overlapped you there, but not only what they are, but why they matter, right? And so how they can start using them in their practice going forward. By the way, just before you go on, David Maister's books, we'll put a link in the video to his material. He is, I think, long retired, but he was like the master of professional services marketing and management. So he's a real guru out of the States. Excuse me. So Colin, those 5 levers, where do you want to start? You want to talk about rates first?
Yeah, let's talk about rates, because rates are really important and can be tweaked very easily to increase the profitability of a firm. And we talk about effective rates is the one that is most important. And so if you look at what you bill compared to the hours that you bill, you come up with this calculation of what the effective rate is. And so firms can calculate effective rates for you as a timekeeper, or they can do it for a client. They can do it for the firm. So at all different levels, the firm, the client, the lawyer, even the matter, they can understand what their effective rate is. And so that's kind of measuring that rate at the top line and increasing revenue. And so just increasing your effective rate by $5 or $10 an hour can make a dramatic impact on profitability with not a lot of work on the part of the firm. So that's the first thing. And the second,
let me go back. Can I just put that in the context of a student? So what would be a typical student rate as they come into a firm? What would be their hourly rate? Probably,
it could be somewhere in around, say, $150 an hour might be kind of a starting point for a student rate.
So 150, maybe less, will depend on the market, 150 an hour. So that's the rate that they're going to clients to charge, but the effective rate is likely to be quite a bit lower.
For students, it can be, because for someone who's just starting out and learning, there's going to be some significant write-down when the time gets billed. Right. So it wouldn't be surprising. It could be as much as a 50% write-down for a student, which gives an effective rate of about, say, $75 an hour if their standard rate is $150. But that shouldn't be your concern, because the firms are aware that you're coming in, you're learning, and the billing lawyer will take care of that time when they bill. So the key for you is to get all your time in and let somebody else worry about billing the time. So that alone is so helpful. So a student can bill at $150 an hour. They can work on something for 4 hours, just to do really simple math here. So, you know, a student would think that their bill is going to go out for $600, 150 times 4. But when it lands at the partner looks at that and goes, okay, I'm actually going to write off. I'm going to set aside half of the time, because it really should have taken them 2 hours, but we get it. They're learning. It's the first memo of this nature that they've done. They did a lot of research, what have you. So the effective rate is actually half. So the effective rate that goes to the client is actually going to be $75 an hour. I just wanted to go over that one more time, because I think it's such an important point that you make, and that not to worry about it, because it's the student's responsibility is do the work at the best rate, the best ability of your level, get good instructions from the partner, but record your time. Don't be shy about recording your time, and let the partner take care of it. Yeah. So that's rates, right? Yeah. So that's the rates. And then the next really important concept is leverage. And again, many partners don't understand the impact of leverage and its impact on profitability. So when we look at leverage, one of the metrics we look at is associate to partner leverage. So how many associates does the firm have? Maybe they've got, say, 5 associates and they've got 5 partners. That would be a 1-to-1 associate to partner leverage. And that is the typical firm that we deal with, would be that 1-to-1 associate partner leverage. Now, some firms that are looking at it in a way that they want to increase their profitability, or they have a practice that can justify having more leverage, might be a practice like personal injury, or a practice like commercial real estate, where they can actually then start to lever to paralegals as well as associates. And so you can increase your profitability dramatically just by increasing your leverage. And that can also work for the partners themselves. So if there's fewer partners, more associates, there's going to be more of a pie for the partners to share. And it's, can be a much more efficient way to convert revenues into profits.
So leverage is really also about pushing the work down, either to associates, to staff, to paralegals, pushing it down. And your example of personal injury is a good one, where it's very, it's very systematic. It's mostly predictable, and you can really get a lot of staff support for that kind of practice. So that's
Yeah.
a great example. Yeah. Okay. So leverage, that's a good one. What's next? So utilization is next.
Utilization, yeah. So your average firm in BC would be about 1,400, 1,500 billable hours. But many firms don't reach that number. And the key to that number is that's where associates can be profitable, because you have to cover off your overhead and you have to cover off the associate salary. And then there has to be some profit margin left over. So in order to create that profit margin, you need to be creating about 1,400, 1,500 billable hours for the associates for them to be profitable, and then help make that leverage situation that we just talked about, make that work. Because if you're down around 1,100 or 1,000 hours per associate, the leverage won't help increase the profitability of the firm. So that's another key concept in terms of how these profitability levers interrelate to each other.
And not to get too complicated, but what you're talking about is actually billed, no write-offs, actual time that actually gets billed and paid by a client. So those 1,400 hours, in effect, actually could take somebody easily, 1,800, 1,900 hours to actually get to the 1,400 hours of billed time.
It depends on the firm, but yes, it's possible, say in a personal injury practice, it depends what the end result, what the settlement is for.
Yeah.
You could put in twice as many hours.
Yeah.
What you eventually, bill it, get settled at.
Yeah.
And it depends on the practice, whereas maybe an area like commercial real estate or other commercial work, you're probably, closer to, realization of almost 100%, which we'll talk about in a minute. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to underscore that this is billed time, not what we were talking about before, where you record the time and it gets written off. But this is billed time of 1,400 to 1,500 hours. Yeah.
Yes, it's effectively collected billings.
Collected. Yeah. So you bill it and the client pays the full bill. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so that's utilization. And are you going to realization next?
Let's talk about realization, because again, I hinted at that if you're billing close to what your standard rate is, you're getting 100% realization. And if you're again that example we had where you're at 150 and then end up with an effective rate of 75, your realization is only 50%. And so the importance of that realization and that where we're talking there is billing realization, that is almost a comparable to profitability, a very rough measure of profitability when you're able to achieve realization of 50 or 70 or 100%. So 100% realization is much more profitable work than work that's coming through at 50 or 70 or even 80%. So it's really important that you're getting that realization up to around ideally 95% of the standard rate that you're billing clients at.
And that's high for a firm, 95%, but that would be great. But that's
it's actually average.
95%.
If you took the entire population, say of BC firms as an example, it's around 95% is the realization.
Right.
And then some firms might from there go to 90% on collected. But it's a fairly high amount. And keep in mind, you've also got large firms and small firms all mixed into coming up with those numbers. So maybe smaller firms, they might have a lower realization, more like 80, 85, 90%. And it depends on the area of practice as well.
Yeah, right. So realization, so we want, it's realistic that coming into a firm, you could work 10 hours, even associates, you could work a 10-hour day and only bill 5 hours, let's say, maybe 6 hours, depending on the kind of practice and the kind of files that you're working on. So I think that's important for people to, for students especially to know, because you're going to have a lot of time written off. But it would be nice if there was a target. It just occurred to me, it'd be nice if when students came in, they had a target to say, not to worry, we think you're your realization rate should be 50%. It's going to be in and around probably 50 to 60%, and that's okay. Just keep recording your time.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for sure. Yeah, targets are good. Everybody likes to have a target and know what you're shooting.
A reasonable target. Yeah. And then is margin the last one?
Yes, margin is where you look at net income for the firm as an example compared to its revenues. So normally firms would average around somewhere between 35 and 45% net income compared to their total revenue. So it's almost comparable to that 3-to-1 compensation ratio that you hear about, that, you bill out at, that's your 100%, and then you end up with profit of about 33%. Mm-hmm. So that's 3-to-1 effectively. And that's the margin firms are usually looking for from associates, getting that 3-to-1 billings to compensation industry rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately for firms these days, because associates are in such high demand and they're asking for higher salaries, and, we're talking, pretty big numbers that they can command. So now we're not getting that, profit margin, that 33% profit margin. It's getting cut down significantly because associate salaries are growing as a piece of the entire pie.
Yeah, it's shrinking. The profits are shrinking a bit. Things are getting tighter. Yeah. Well, that's a great overview, Colin. I think that the takeaways there, bill your time, record all of your time. Let the partner, decide what goes forward to the client. And you've given some really good future definitions, which may not be meaningful yet, but great for them to know what these are, and pay attention to them increasingly as they move through their practice. I think that's great. There was a time, so you started in law a little before me. I started about 25 years ago. And I can say that when I started, law firms didn't all think of themselves as a business. It was still very traditional. It was still a field that was very much seeped in tradition and precedents, and which was lovely. But there was a bit of a shift, right, into really understanding, as marketing certainly came into play, and as people were hiring COOs and others. When did you see that in your career, when firms started to see themselves as a business and start to shift their thinking and their operations?
Yeah, for me, I started in the 80s, and at that time, firms were just starting to think about things like alternative billing and fixed fees and things like that. Yeah, and it really didn't become popular till much later for many law firms, although accounting firms have been doing this for years. They do all their audits with fixed fees and alternative billing. But probably around the 90s, I started to see, and coincidentally, when David Maister published his book, Managing the Professional Service Firm, that started to identify profit per partner as a metric for firms to be targeting. And the American Lawyer started producing a survey of, the top 100 law firms in the States, in terms of what their profit per partner was, what their revenue per partner was. And we all sat back and were amazed when we saw numbers like, wow, 3 million a partner, 4 million a partner, profit per partner. And that's when I think a lot of firms just kind of stood up and took notice and went, oh my God, look at the kind of profit you can create in a law firm. And how do they do that? And then they started to understand and learn through various consultants who were on the scene, Brad Hildebrandt and Bill Cobb and, Gary Garrett of Pensa Consulting. And they brought this, this new information about how to run your firm like a business. And people could see in the American Lawyer surveys, well, oh my God, look what's possible. And then you had firms really start to, you created national firms in Canada as well as the United States. International firms started coming. So to me, it was all happening in that kind of the 90s and then into the 2000s, where then it got even bigger, and Norton Rose came in and took over Ogilvy and McLeod Dixon, and international firms started arriving on the scene.
Well, I think, as you say, firms started to pay attention to the profits that were happening south of the border. We're in Canada, so south of the border first. And they were paying attention to how did they actually do that? And what were the management models that they were using to achieve those profits? And what did they need to do? So I think there was a slow adoption of what was happening south of us, which was slow, right? I mean, firms aren't known to be super innovative really quickly, but it was slow. So you and I both started to see in the early parts of our career, other professionals coming. Now, I hate the word non-lawyers, but I'm going to use it. You're going to laugh at me, but I'm going to use it. Johanna's smiling. Other professionals coming in to support the business of law that weren't lawyers or paralegals or assistants. They were on what I call the business services side of a law firm. And you were probably one of the early ones to see that, where we saw perhaps partners spending too much time on human resource matters. And human resource matters are really important, but does it take a partner to step away from their client work to work on human resource issues, right? So then firms got smart and they went, we gotta hire a human resource professional who's really good at this, can do it at a lower cost for the firm, right? So did you start to see, I can't remember what was happening for you early on in those years, but did you start to see that evolving?
Yeah. Firms really started to think about the concept of leverage, which Maister as one of the consultants was really promoting, and they started to understand, does it make sense for a partner at $800 an hour to be trying to handle, what color the paint's going to be on the walls and dealing with staff issues, and they realized that no, I should be spending more time on business development. I should be bringing in those high quality, very profitable clients, and I should be doing very high level legal work instead of all these administrative tasks that are much more productively done by business professionals, whether they're HR or IT, and chief operating officers started to become more in vogue as compared to just an office manager. Now you had C-level executives, you had CMOs and COOs starting to come in, and then you started to see managing partners and CEOs, and the concept of being a CEO in your business, just like any regular business, started to become much more popular. So
you're talking about the C-suite, and I just want to define that. So CEO, I think, is fairly commonly known as the Chief Executive Officer, COO, Chief Operating Officer, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and so on. So that's what we call the C-suite, which was adopted in the South or in the US much earlier than it was for us in Canada. But we have started, many firms now have COOs. You and I have served as COOs in firms, and other C positions, chief positions, particularly in the national firms. They have those positions well in place and have done so for some time now. And as we're talking about those business professionals coming in, doing a good job, releasing the partners, otherwise known as business owners, from some of the operational responsibilities so they can focus on client work, is classic to any business owner. Once you achieve a level of maturity in your business, you achieve a level of success in your business, you're in a position to delegate work to people who can do it at a lower cost, but in many cases they can do it better because they're disciplined in that area, do it better than a partner can do it. So the model really makes a lot of sense. So in terms of governance, and we touched on this just for a second, but the governance of firms, Colin, can you kind of take us through the common structures, just really at a high level, so students have an idea of what they're coming into?
Sure. So often small, mid-sized firms would be operating as pretty much as a democracy. So that's one model that is actually very common because lawyers are pretty independent and they tend to build their own practices, and then they'd come together in firms. And so partners are involved in almost every decision and want to be. So it's one model. It's not a very efficient model because you've also got committees, and then you don't have a managing partner. You may have a management committee, but they may not have a lot of power to make anything happen. And so that's one kind of one extreme is the pure democracy. And actually, probably at least half the firms are set up like that in the small, mid-size arena. If not more, it might even be higher than that. Depends on the area and US versus Canada geographically. So the other model, which it tends to be more effective, is to actually have a managing partner that has authority, to make things happen and is elected by the partners for, say, a 3 to 5 year term, and would then be able to execute the firm's business plan. Mm-hmm. And they would coordinate the plan, get it going, and get the partners together and get them.
If they have a plan.
Well, this would be creating the plan, for many firms, and many firms don't have a plan. So a very good point. We walk into firms all the time. They don't have written strategic plans, and that's usually our first recommendation. You need a plan that's actually written and that people are following and is actually being implemented. So there's different levels of that in every firm. Lots of firms may also do plans, but up on the shelf, never happens. And so then you have to figure out how it gets executed. And that's where this other more centralized structure with a managing partner and maybe an executive committee, directing the managing partner in the execution of the plan works a lot better than having a pure democracy, which is not working for many firms, and it takes some time to trust to give someone the authority to do these things.
Right. So you'll have an executive committee, a managing partner who's elected, who's typically a partner, who allocates some time to firm management in that role. Sometimes they're practicing law. Most often they're practicing law as well as managing the firm for a period of time. As you said, I think it's 3 to 5 years. That's very typical. And then practice groups, pardon me, in many firms, mid-size and larger, typically will have practice groups underneath the managing partner who are, solely concerned with that area of law. And then, you and I have seen a lot, Colin and I, we've worked on a lot of firms and a lot of different structures, and we've seen a lot of different things, but commonly we'll see those practice groups. Sometimes we'll see departments, litigation departments, solicitors department all led by leaders, right? So the interesting thing that has evolved is the leadership training and needs of those partners or senior associates in leading those efforts. Which is a great part of their succession plan, right? But going back to the extreme, Colin, you've got the democracy. Often they have a managing partner or somebody who's in charge. And on the flip side, national firms, they've got the C-suite, right? They've got the executive committee. They've got the managing partner. What am I missing? The departments, the practice groups, and then a whole suite of business services people, right?
Yeah, it's very extensive, just like a large corporation and large national and international firms. And so, they're making the best use of all the resources. They're using leverage. They're using all the techniques, the profitability levers that we discussed earlier.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fun to pull it apart and look at it. And I know you and I are trusted by clients to do that. And it continues to be really fascinating. Any last tips for students? Anything that we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about, the financial essentials coming into a firm. You took us through that. When did we consider a law firm a business? You took us through that. The other professionals in a law firm, including the C-suite, the governance. The other thing that you emphasized too, which I think is really important, is record your time, all your time. Let a partner deal with what gets billed, what doesn't get billed, but record all of your time. That's really just good habits right from the get-go. Anything else that we've missed, Colin?
Well, I guess it's something for the future. So when you look at firms and what really makes them tick and how things happen and how you create profitability, it's becoming a business developer. So
we're getting into that. Yes.
About that, even from the start, that thinking about, so what area of practice do I really want to get into and enjoy, and building that network, and then thinking about how I'm going to be a client developer, because that's how you're going to become a partner in the firm. And when firms look at, how they compensate their partners. The people at the top of the heap are going to be rainmakers. They're going to be client developers, and that's what's expected from partners. And so again, many firms, they kind of go along, they don't build this in with their students through their associates, their senior associates. And then all of a sudden you're a partner, and now I'm expected to develop clients. So you should be thinking about that, whether it's your own practice or whether, you're eventually going to have your own firm, or whether it's, another firm, or the same firm that you article with, you're going to be a partner in, or even as in-house counsel, understanding, the people that you're dealing with and what their motivations are, understanding that, this need to develop clients, and ideally, be a client developer. You have to do it all as a partner, and you need to do the client development to be an equity partner in a firm. And so that is what you're really reaching for, is that equity partnership. And you can really have a great career that way.
Equity partner where you have a financial stake in the firm, because there's other models of partnership, of course. Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's the accountant that brings in the business development. I don't know if Colin and I have worked a long time together, but you've got, that's been part of your, your formula for success for many years. I know that you really understood that piece of it. And it can start early enough, right? Even in small measure, to really start forming those good habits, to position yourself to develop business. And I know that we're going to be teaching our students a course on that right from the get-go, so they can start on that. It's sort of like compound interest, right? Start benefiting from those contacts, and then continually, move through more sophisticated strategies as they develop as lawyers, right? So, and I, the notion of partnership too. Some firms may not even invite you into the partnership if you haven't developed your own book of business. So that's something to think about as well. Colin, this has been fun. You and I have spent many, many hours talking about what you just took us through in a few minutes. So I appreciate you condensing this into a small, short little package here. And this was really helpful. I really appreciate you coming in and helping students get some framework and some orientation. I wish all of our students knew this content coming in. Johanna, any last words? Yeah. Sorry?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Stay tuned for our Lawyer Launcher debrief. So Colin hit on so many different pieces of how you can evaluate, look at, manage a law firm business. And I'm pretty sure we gave you all more than what is needed. But I think it's going to be one of those things that when you revisit it, having recorded time, having looked at bills, having kind of get into the mix of a law firm business, you're going to come back, I think, and look at some of those pieces and go, okay, let me bring, what's a good example? Effective rate. What was that again? And then you're going to start to uncover all of these pieces and gain greater understanding and greater learning as you and I have done that, Johanna, where we've gone, now I have context for this new information, and I can go back and do some learning and bring it forward. Do you know what I mean?
I do. When I come into a new situation, even if it's something I don't need to know, I kind of want to know, at least from a high level, because it just gives me that lay of the land and some context. Even if I don't get into the nitty gritty of understanding everything, it just helps me see my place in the big picture when I just get a general sense. So, I mean, I remember when I first worked in a law firm, not as a lawyer, obviously, but as an admin assistant, I didn't really know anything about the legal world. I just kind of found myself in this job, and I was scared to say something dumb, frankly. And so often I would just kind of be quiet. And had I, at that young age, perhaps done a little legwork and done some research, it just gives you that confidence that you know where you fit in. You know when people talk about something, you do understand roughly what they're talking about. And I think for students coming into a firm, they want to look like they know what they're doing as much as you can at that stage of your career. And so I think just having a general understanding of all aspects, and that's really what our course is about, is helping people understand all aspects of this new world that they're coming into so that they can just tread more confidently. And when they hear something, they'll have a reference point for that.
Reference point. Yeah, I love that idea. And even to sit down with maybe a manager of accounting or a practice group leader or the finance partner, the partner that is responsible for firm finance. It's frequently a position that they give to a partner, a responsibility they give to a partner, to take them for lunch and go, I heard this podcast about realization rates, utilization. Do you know anything about that? Because as a student, you get a complete pass to ask, as far as I'm concerned, any question, because you're learning. And it's such a great demonstration of being an energized, eager, enthusiastic learner, is to go and seek out people you can continue learning from. So to take some of these nuggets, even if you don't understand them with any degree of depth, to grab that finance partner, to grab that accounting manager, to grab whoever you think has a little iota of depth in these areas, and to continue to kind of pull on the threads and to bring them into your own experience so that you can not only understand them, but actually really lean into how the data is going to work for you. And origination of work, which we really didn't get to, that's where you are actually identifying new work for a firm, and you as a lawyer get credit for bringing in new work. That's another formula, and it's very rewarding to do that financially in most firms. So
yeah, and that's where partners really, the longer you're with a firm, the more work you can bring on and then pass down. You're still getting
100%.
basically paid, remunerated for that work you brought in, and you're not even doing the work.
And here's the thing. I just talked to a colleague of mine who was talking about frankly a junior associate who is sub 3 years call, who was bringing in tons of work into their firm and getting very, very richly rewarded for that work, fairly to the firm and fairly to the associate. But this associate is just on fire, bringing in work, probably having some fun doing it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so fruitful, and getting rewarded even at a junior level. So it's not necessarily reserved only for senior lawyers. It can be done at any level. Students, I mean, even admin people bring in, I don't mean to sound dismissive, but admin people also are known to bring in work as well.
Not only are you rewarded financially, but you also become more valuable to a firm. So that gives you a little bit of wiggle room if maybe something doesn't go quite perfectly, if they see you as an overall asset to the firm because you're bringing in that work. Not that you're expected in a junior level typically to bring work in, but it just gives you that little extra foothold.
Well, if you're showing if you're showing some interest and some success in business development early on, the firm will pay attention. They will notice. And you know, frankly, partners who are the rainmakers of firms who bring in the most work are very powerful people in a firm. Yeah. You know, that's just the reality.
And the one thing that, sorry.
Go ahead.
The one thing that Colin mentioned towards the end about business development is really, and what you're saying here too, is that just how important relationships are at every stage. So when you're talking about going to the accounting person, finance person, or whoever it is in the firm that you think you can learn something from, just building those connections and those relationships will be so valuable as you go through your career, and just that mindset of curiosity, really, and not being afraid to make a connection. I've talked to students and junior associates who are just really hesitant. They didn't want to bother anybody. And I said, you know, as one of the first things you do while you're here is, why don't you just start reaching out and start with the most junior people for that coffee, you know, and just build up your confidence. And most people are delighted to meet up. They may not be able to meet up with you this week. It might be a month from now, but they're more than happy to, you know, pay forward some knowledge about what they do and talk about themselves and their career. And yeah, that's so helpful for you, and it feels good for them, and it's just a win-win. And I wish younger or more junior students would have more confidence in that area, and hopefully we can help them get there.
I think that's a great point. And it doesn't mean to say that you have to invite the director of finance out for coffee or for lunch, because he or she may be really very, very busy. Some might make time. Might be the manager. It might be, you know, a more junior person in the accounting team. So, you know, just get your edge where you can. But I think that's a really important point that you just made, and I love that. And for Colin to wrap us on business development was just a beautiful thing. I was not expecting that. I like him totally. I was not expecting that. That was awesome. Excellent. Great. All right, we've got some tools now. So we'll go off, and hopefully our students will be successful with that as well.
Yes, I'll see you at the next one.
Yeah.